Hi, it's Kirby Sommers. Today is Monday, August 25th, 2025. And as per the title of this podcast, that is whether or not Virginia will basically have the last word. And so I have news for you. What we have heard, Friday, we had the pretty unsettling drop from the Justice Department, who released what they call their complete transcript, although a lot was redacted, and audio recording between Deputy General Attorney Todd Blanche, who had a almost 2 day long conversation with Ghislaine Maxwell in late July. Well, I mean, we have seen and heard how everyone is kind of like, oh my God, he was leading her with questions. He didn't press on others. However, Virginia Giuffre may very possibly have the last word because it has just been reported that she was working on a new memoir just before she suddenly and unexplainably, I still can't wrap my mind around it, as I'm sure many of you can't either, was found not to be breathing anymore, allegedly of self harm. So she was writing a memoir. The memoir is called Nobody's Girl, a memoir of surviving abuse and fighting for justice. And it's scheduled for release October 21st. So I just want to put up an image of Virginia's book that she was working on. And she was doing a lot of things. She was in the middle of renovating her home where she had moved to because she separated from her husband Robbie. And she had been working on a memoir, a new one, not the one that was submitted to the court as part of her, let's say, documents, but a new one. Now, she was working on this with journalist Amy Wallace and had completed the 400-page manuscript according to the publisher, Numph. The publisher's statement includes an email from Virginia to Wallace sent a few weeks before her unalivement, let's just call it, saying that it was her heartfelt wish the memoir be released, listen to this, regardless of her circumstances. So even at that point, she was concerned about not being alive and that she made her wishes clear to the publisher, saying, no matter what happens to me, I want this book to be published. I'm going to continue to read what some of the excerpts. The content of the book is crucial as it aims to shed light on the systematic failures that allow the trafficking of vulnerable adults. I'm sorry, let me just rephrase, of vulnerable individuals across borders. That's what the email reads in part. And then I'm going to continue. It is imperative that the truth is understood and that the issues surrounding this topic are addressed, both for the sake of justice and awareness. Now, Virginia was hospitalized on March 24th and sent the email a week later on April 1st. And then Virginia expired on April 25th. And she wrote, in the event of my passing. So remember when everybody was making fun of Virginia for saying that she had 4 days to live? She wrote in her email to Numph, in the event of my passing, I would like to ensure that Nobody's Girl is still released. I believe it has the potential to impact many lives and foster necessary discussions about these grave injustices. And she wrote that to Wallace, who was helping her with the book. Now, in 2023, the New York Post had reported that Virginia had reached a deal believed to be worth millions. Good for her. Sadly, who gets that, right? Her very abusive ex husband. And by the way, in one of my podcasts of, I believe, 2 weeks ago, you may want to go listen to that again. I expose how the attorneys were making advances And in fact, in some cases, more than advances, the attorneys that were representing Virginia and some of the other survivors, and, carrying on inappropriate behavior. This behavior reportedly commenced at around 2014 when Bradley Edwards allowed J. Stanley Pottinger and David Boies, as per his own book, to become attorneys for the victims he represented. Some of the information that has been sort of released to the public at large is that Virginia's husband, Robert, did not become abusive until this period. So pretty much about 10 years ago is when it is reported that the abusive relationship started. Now, I know from other survivors that they too had problems with their significant other because of the advances, the advances by one or more of these attorneys on these women. Now, like they were at the time in their 30s, 40s. So now they were grown women, but that it created a sort of like tension in the relationship. So one has to wonder if, in fact, the relationship with Robbie didn't go sour until this period when Virginia started coming forward and is now with these, what I consider very unscrupulous attorneys, whether or not that was the tipping point for this man who then became physically abusive and that it contributed to her demise. So that's something to think about because it's really interesting that she would stay with him for such a long period of time if he had been abusive before this. But she continued because clearly, as I have said before, she really paid attention and listened and did what David Boies asked her to do. So again, I'm going to go back. In 2023, the New York Post had reported that Virginia had reached a deal believed to be worth millions with an undisclosed publisher. Knopf spokesperson Todd Doty said that she initially agreed to a 7-figure contract with Penguin Press, but moved away from there, acquiring editor Emily Cunningham after Knopf hired Cunningham as executive editor last year. So Virginia often stated in the early 2000s when she was a teenager, she was caught up in the Epstein transportation ring and that she was, let's call it, exploited by Britain's Prince Andrew. So I'm going to just go back and put this on the stage. I'm going to go back and show you a photograph of Virginia at the time. Doesn't look very happy in that photograph to me. And we know that Ghislaine Maxwell exonerated Donald Trump, praising him effusively. And we see Donald Trump here with his friend, Jeffrey Epstein, oogling women and partying. And we see here Jeffrey Epstein and Bill Clinton, whom again, Ghislaine Maxwell exonerated, basically saying, I don't really think they were even close friends. They didn't really have deep feelings for each other. She said, well, he liked me. What a narcissist bitch she is. Sorry. But did they really like each other? No, I think he liked me, meaning Clinton. Well, I don't know. They're staring at each other's eyes like they were boyfriend and girlfriend. That's how it looks like to me. But yeah, Ghislaine just exonerated everyone, including Andrew. But again, Virginia may have the last word. So let me just keep going here. Now, Andrew denied Virginia's allegations. However, in 2022, he reached an out of court settlement after she sued him. And a representative for Andrew was, in fact, they wanted a comment from him because this book is coming out. And no comment forthcoming. All right. So, Nobody's Girl is different from Virginia's unpublished memoir, The Billionaire's Playboy Club, which was referenced in court filings. And it was initially unsealed in 2019. And so Virginia started working on this book in the spring of 2021. So she has spent a couple of years doing this. Now, her name continues to appear in headlines, as we know, even after the fact that she's no longer here. In July, Donald Trump told reporters that, quote, Epstein had stolen Virginia from Mar-a-Lago, which, you know, Ghislaine, who maybe doesn't see all of the news, didn't catch the fact that Donald Trump actually said this. And Ghislaine, in her so-called testimony with Todd Blanche, said, "Oh no, nobody was procured from Mar-a-Lago. I used to just go there." Okay, so even Donald Trump says more than Ghislaine Maxwell. Okay, all right. So Virginia did say that she was approached by Maxwell and hired as a masseuse for Epstein. And of course, Maxwell denied Virginia's allegations. But what we cannot forget or lose sight of is that Virginia did file a defamation lawsuit against Ghislaine. And Ghislaine settled before she could testify for the last time, sort of give a deposition in front of the judge, because she was just taking the fifth, not answering. Okay, so it was scheduled, and then I told you that David Boies settled this pretty much on the court steps, but that Virginia wanted this to be heard by the jury. It never was. The settlement that she paid Virginia forced her to sell the townhouse on East 65th Street, at which point she had to move out. So clearly, she blames Virginia for everything that bad that ever happened to her. She doesn't blame herself at all. Okay, so now the publishers are not providing details about who is featured in Virginia's newest book, Nobody's Girl. And I'm going to tell you now that because it is published by one of these, I'm just going to call it elite company-owned firms, we're not going to hear the names that Virginia initially shared in her own memoir, which she had to rewrite when she started stepping forward. So a lot of that is going to be redacted. However, the publisher says that the book does contain intimate, disturbing, and heartbreaking new details about her time with Epstein, Maxwell, and their many well-known friends, including Prince Andrew, about whom she speaks publicly for the first time since their out-of-court settlement in 2022. And I mean, look, they're doing pre-publicity for the book. They paid Virginia a lot of money. They're basically calling it raw and shocking. Okay, we've heard Virginia. We've read Virginia's tweets. We know that everything is shocking, but it continues to be debated and is now, according to Donald Trump, is being presented to the public as a hoax. And the fact that Ghislaine Maxwell pretty much said, oh, well, Donald Trump did nothing, Bill Clinton did nothing, Prince Andrew did nothing, nobody did anything. Okay, well, this is going to be a cleaned up version of whatever Virginia did publicly. And, in a way, even if it doesn't, let's say, expose the names that we already know and which came from Virginia, At least Virginia, thank goodness, will have the last word. Um, so, Virginia's family did come out uh, after Ghislaine Maxwell gave that really bizarre 2-day get out of jail free pass interview. And, they're outraged by the Justice Department's decision to release these transcripts. And they're like basically saying that it gave Maxwell a platform to rewrite history. And I'm going to quote: the content of these transcripts is in direct contradiction with felon Ghislaine Maxwell's conviction for child as transportation. And they said this through a family spokesperson in a statement. During Todd Blanche's bizarre interview, she is never challenged about her court proven lies, providing her a platform to rewrite history. Now, Maxwell was sentenced to 20 years in jail for trafficking of minors in 2022. She was moved to a minimum security prison in Texas following her cooperation with Blanche and really Donald Trump, who not only did she exonerate him, but she talked about how wonderful he was, how her father liked him, how, he was a perfect gentleman. I mean, she was effusive with complimentary things. Now, the only reason that Blanche went to do this clearly is to serve at the pleasure of Donald Trump and continue to serve at his pleasure, because let's remember, he was his attorney privately in other legal matters. So Virginia's family said the decision to move Maxwell sends a disturbing message that as transportation is acceptable and will be rewarded. So I want to say that that's true, that if you study previous ones, such as the Franklin case and others that came before it, which I write about on my Substack. And by the way, if you're not a member, consider upgrading your membership, becoming a full member so you can access, I think I have about 350 articles in there. And I go through a lot of, and I provide receipts, a lot of rabbit holes connecting this to almost every administration going back. It's not just that it began in this administration. It's like embedded into the way our country is run, and not just our country, by the way, because this has no borders. So I wanted to just let you know that we may just have Virginia be the one who has the last word and not Ghislaine Maxwell. And I'm dying to hear what you have to say about the latest news that Virginia's book will be published in October. All right, guys. Well, thanks for taking a listen. Subscribe, like, share. And thanks again for being wonderfully supportive of the work and the ongoing expansion of the awareness so that, more people can know what's happening right next door. All right, guys. Have a good day. Bye.